The ending of Little House on the Prairie brings together many of the ideas the series has been building from the very beginning. Although the season starts with the Ingalls family believing they have found the perfect opportunity in Independence, Kansas, the finale reveals that the promise of a fresh start was never as simple as it appeared. What initially looked like a chance to build a better future slowly turns into a harsh lesson about survival, community, and the reality behind the American dream of settling the West. When Charles decided to move his family from Wisconsin, he believed the advertisements promising free land on the prairie. Like countless other settlers, he imagined that hard work alone would allow his family to create a prosperous life. But as soon as the Ingalls reached independence, they realized that almost everything they had been promised was misleading. The town lacked basic necessities like schools and churches, and even more importantly, the land they believed was available was already home to the Osage people. Throughout the season, the conflict over the land becomes one of the show's central storylines. Instead of presenting the settlement of the West as a simple tale of pioneers finding empty land, the series explores the uncomfortable truth that the land already belonged to the Osage Nation. The settlers themselves were not entirely aware of the situation when they arrived. They had been encouraged by government-backed promises and railroad advertisements designed to attract as many families as possible. The more settlers who moved into the area, the easier it became to pressure the Osage into leaving, making way for railroad expansion and new development. By the later episodes, that hidden plan finally comes into the open. Eli James reveals that the railroad intentionally distributed the advertisements because every new family settling in Independence strengthened the government's position against the Osage. The settlers believed they were chasing opportunity, but they were unknowingly participating in a much larger political strategy. The show makes it clear that many ordinary families were manipulated alongside the native people who ultimately suffered the greatest loss. The Osage storyline reaches an emotional turning point when tribal leaders meet to negotiate their future. Rather than depicting the tribe as powerless, the series shows them fighting for the best possible outcome under impossible circumstances. Governor Joe initially refuses to sign the proposed treaty, recognizing that leaving their homeland is a devastating sacrifice. However, after further negotiations, the Osage secure important changes to the agreement. They insist on maintaining the right to hunt buffalo beyond their new territory and ensure that their new land will remain communal instead of being divided into individual allotments. These victories cannot erase what they are losing, but they demonstrate the determination and leadership of the Osage people during an incredibly difficult moment. This conflict is also reflected through Laura's friendship with Good Eagle. Instead of keeping the Osage characters in the background, the series develops a genuine relationship between two girls growing up in very different worlds. Laura's curiosity allows her to learn from Good Eagle, while Good Eagle discovers similarities between their families despite their different cultures. Their friendship becomes one of the emotional foundations of the season because it reminds viewers that children often see humanity before prejudice. When the Osage prepare to leave Kansas for Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma, Mitchell, White Sun, and Good Eagle choose to travel with their people. Their departure marks the end of an important chapter for both families. Before saying goodbye, Laura and Good Eagle promise to stay connected through letters. Laura even imagines that one day those letters could become a book. It is a small but meaningful moment because it quietly hints at Laura's future career as a writer. Earlier in the finale, she unexpectedly discovers her own talent for storytelling during the town's essay competition. Mary had originally planned to participate in the contest, but after becoming distracted by her relationship with Caleb, she never arrives to deliver her prepared speech. Laura steps in at the last minute and abandons the written remarks altogether, choosing instead to speak honestly about what she has learned during her family's time in Independence. She reflects on the irony of the town's name, explaining that despite being called Independence, none of its residents could survive alone. Every hardship they faced was overcome only because neighbors helped one another. Although Laura does not win the competition, her speech represents one of her biggest personal milestones. Rather than memorizing someone else's words, she speaks from experience, revealing both confidence and compassion beyond her years. The finale uses this moment to suggest that Laura's greatest strength may not simply be her adventurous spirit, but her ability to observe the world around her and transform those experiences into meaningful stories. As the series continues, these moments are expected to become the foundation for the writer she will eventually become. The importance of community extends beyond Laura's speech. Throughout the season, every member of the Ingalls family changes because of the people they meet. Caroline gradually overcomes many of the assumptions she carried with her from Wisconsin. At first, she views several of the town's residents with suspicion, particularly John Edwards, whose drinking and troubled behavior make her question whether he belongs around her family. But as she learns about his painful past, including the loss of his entire family to cholera after returning home from the Civil War, she begins seeing him not as a broken man, but as someone searching for healing, just like everyone else in Independence. Charles undergoes his own emotional journey as well. His recurring dreams about his brother George reveal years of buried guilt. George returned from the Civil War deeply traumatized, suffering from what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. Charles believed his brother needed treatment, but George interpreted those concerns as rejection, ran away, and later died by suicide. Charles has blamed himself ever since, carrying emotional scars that followed him all the way to Kansas. Moving west was never just about finding free land. It was also an attempt to leave painful memories behind and build a future where his family could thrive despite the tragedies of the past. Just as the Ingalls family finally begins to feel at home, everything they have built starts to fall apart. Caroline has become a respected leader within the Women's Society. Charles has earned the trust of the entire community, and both Laura and Mary have found a sense of belonging. Even the arrival of baby Carrie gives the family hope that they have finally found a place where they can settle permanently. But the finale reminds us that life on the frontier is unpredictable, and sometimes even the hardest work cannot protect people from forces beyond their control. The family's financial problems begin when Charles and Caroline receive devastating news from Wisconsin. The family who purchased their former property can no longer continue making payments after the buyer suffers a stroke. The income the Ingalls expected to receive suddenly disappears, leaving them with growing debts and very few options. Desperate to provide for his family, Charles considers accepting work with the railroad, even though the available jobs are hundreds of miles away in Nebraska or Colorado and would require him to leave his wife and daughters behind for an entire year. At the same time, another crushing setback arrives. Now that the government has finalized its agreement with the Osage, the promises that originally attracted settlers to independence are exposed as empty. Charles learns that the Homestead Act no longer protects their claim. Instead of receiving free land, every settler must now purchase it from the government within just 2 weeks. Ironically, the government had bought the land from the Osage for $1.25 an acre, but now expected settlers to pay $1.50 per acre. For struggling families like the Ingalls, that amount is impossible to afford. Eli James offers Charles a loan, but only if he agrees to work for the railroad far away from his family. The proposal highlights the same system that created the problem in the first place. The railroad companies helped lure settlers west with promises of opportunity, encouraged them to occupy disputed land, and now stood ready to profit again by offering loans and employment to people who had been left with no alternatives. The finale presents this as a cycle in which ordinary families are caught between powerful political and economic interests they cannot control. Before Charles can even decide what to do, disaster strikes once again. A prairie fire erupts, sending the entire town into panic. Instead of thinking only about themselves, the people of Independence immediately work together to save one another. Buckets of water are passed from hand to hand as everyone joins the desperate effort to stop the flames before they consume the town. At first, it seems as though all hope is lost, but the wind suddenly changes direction, sparing Independence from complete destruction. Unfortunately, the Ingalls family is not as fortunate. When they return home, they discover that their cornfields have been destroyed. Their crops represented their future income and their chance to recover from mounting debt. Without a harvest, they have no realistic way to remain on the land. The prairie, which had offered so much promise, has taken away the very thing they depended on to survive. Unlike many stories that end with the heroes defeating every obstacle, Little House on the Prairie embraces a more realistic conclusion. The Ingalls do not lose because they were lazy or because they made poor decisions. They are defeated by circumstances outside their control: misleading government policies, financial hardship, and the destructive power of nature. As Rebecca Sonnenschein explains, they did not leave Independence on their own terms. Their dreams simply became impossible to sustain. Yet, despite all these setbacks, the ending is far from hopeless. One of the season's strongest messages is that resilience matters more than success. Throughout every challenge, the Ingalls remain together as a family, and that unity becomes their greatest strength. Earlier in the series, Charles often reminded his daughters that hope is the most important thing a person can hold on to. In the finale, those words come back to him through Laura. Seeing her father overwhelmed by everything they have lost, she encourages him by repeating his own lesson: hope is everything, and they cannot give up on it or on each other. It is a touching role reversal that shows how much Laura has grown over the course of the season. Caroline shares a similar perspective. Rather than focusing only on the house they are leaving behind, she reflects on the people they became while living in Independence. She tells Charles that she likes who they are now because coming west changed them for the better. They learned compassion, built friendships, and discovered that true strength comes from supporting one another. If they were able to build that life once, she believes they can build it again somewhere else. John Edwards provides the final spark of optimism. Introduced as a lonely and troubled man haunted by grief, he gradually finds purpose through his friendship with the Ingalls. By the finale, he is no longer an outsider, watching others from a distance. Instead, he asks if he can join the family on the next stage of their journey, proving that they have become the family he thought he had lost forever. His decision perfectly reinforces the season's central message that family is not defined only by blood, but also by the people who stand beside you during life's hardest moments. Edwards also brings exciting news for longtime fans. He suggests that the family travel to a small town in Minnesota called Walnut Grove. While newcomers may simply see this as another destination, fans of the original books and television series know it as the setting where many of Laura Ingalls' most memorable adventures take place. The entire first season deliberately avoided Walnut Grove in order to tell the lesser-known story of the family's time in Kansas, making this final reveal feel like the beginning of a brand new chapter rather than the end of one. The journey to Walnut Grove also sets up several important developments for Season 2. The series has already confirmed that the Ingalls will arrive there, where they are expected to meet the Olsen family, including Nellie Oleson, one of Laura's most famous rivals from the novels. That means the next chapter will introduce many of the iconic relationships and storylines longtime fans have been waiting to see, while continuing Laura's growth into the storyteller whose books would one day preserve these experiences for future generations. The final image of the season captures everything the show wants to say. The Ingalls once again climb into their covered wagon with very few possessions, uncertain of what lies ahead. Beside them rides John Edwards, no longer just a neighbor, but a trusted companion. They leave behind a home they loved, friendships they cherished, and a dream that slipped away despite their best efforts. Yet they also carry something far more valuable than land or crops. They have gained wisdom, resilience, lasting friendships, and the belief that no matter how many times life forces them to begin again, they will face the future together. Ultimately, the ending of Little House on the Prairie is not about failure, but perseverance. It challenges the romantic idea that determination alone guarantees success, and instead argues that life is shaped by circumstances, sacrifice, and the people who stand beside us. Independence may not have become the permanent home the Ingalls imagined, but it transformed them into a stronger family and prepared them for the next chapter of their journey. As they head toward Walnut Grove with hope still intact, the series closes on an uplifting reminder that sometimes the true destination is not a place on the map, but the strength we discover while continuing to move forward.